Hi, welcome everyone. If you want to take your seats. Welcome also to our friends on Zoom. We're happy to have you virtually. And to everyone in person, welcome to Marble House. We are back for our second and final Research Fellows lecture of the 2023 season, the William P. and Jacalyn Egan Lecture. And we'd like to give a special thanks to the Egan family for their support, which makes this evening possible. Bill and Jackie have been long-term supporters of the Preservation Society, including Bill's many years of service on our board. So we want to extend our thanks to them and for their ardent support in the development also of the Research Fellows program, which is why this lecture is named for them. This evening, you will be hearing shortly from our speakers, Research Fellow Ben Bowery and Carola Schueller, our objects conservator. They have been working on a survey of our Jules Allard collection of furniture here at the Preservation Society. Before we hear from them, just so everyone is aware, we will be having a Q&A session at the end of the program, so you'll be welcome to ask questions of Carola and Ben. I know they can answer each of those questions, I'm sure, very thoroughly. There will be a microphone passed around, so if you wouldn't mind raising your hand, we'll make sure that microphone gets to you. And we do that so that, again, our friends on Zoom can also hear those questions, and it gets recorded. If you've not done so already, we also kindly ask that you silence your cell phones. This Thursday, we have our John G. Winslow lecture on August 10th. This will be taking place at the Breakers in the Great Hall, as well as on Zoom. We are very pleased to be welcoming architect and author Philip James Dodd. He is presenting An American Renaissance, Architecture's Impact on the Gilded Age. And Mr. Dodd is one of today's foremost experts on classical architecture and interiors, and his lecture will be exploring 5 homes featured in his latest book, which examine Beaux-Arts architecture in New York City. He will also explore the symbolic relationship of Newport and New York high society and collectively their influences on the television adaptation of Julian Fellowes' Gilded Age on HBO. So we still have some tickets available for in-person, not many, and plenty of room on Zoom, so please visit newportmansions.org to make your reservations. So tonight we are gathered for Surveying the Furniture of Jules Allard. This is a 2-part lecture. First we'll be hearing from Carola Schueller, and then afterwards from Ben Bowery, who have embarked on a long-term study of the Allard furniture in our collection, made by the Paris-based designer Jules Allard in his workshop. And this study is aimed at complementing and promoting the many years of research by our curator emeritus, Paul Miller, who conducted research on Allard and was basically able to shine light on a man who was relatively overlooked by design historians. And so these are great and enormous contributions to Gilded Age design and furniture understanding. As some of you may know, Allard is credited with the introduction of the European-inspired architectural interiors, most notably the French salon, to America's Gilded Age elite. And the Preservation Society believes that we have the largest holding of Allard furniture in the world intact today. So we take that responsibility very seriously. Carola has been working at the Preservation Society's conservation team since 2017 as objects conservator. She's a trained cabinet maker and holds a graduate degree in conservation from the University of Applied Arts and Sciences in Hildesheim, Germany. She has worked as a conservator in private practice and international museums for the past 15 years, including the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam, the Victoria and Albert Museum in London, and the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. She will open the evening by presenting the conservator's perspective on this survey, and which has contributed to the study of manufacturing techniques as well as material used for the decor in the furniture custom made for many of the Preservation Society's houses. Ben Bowery, who will be joining her right after, earned his Master's of Arts degree in the Decorative Art and Design History program from George Washington University, which is co-run by the Smithsonian Associates, also my alma mater. His master's degree focus was on 20th century American furniture interiors, but I have a feeling he's now a 19th century American furniture and interiors person. He has worked as a researcher for the Williamsburg Documentary Project at the College of William & Mary and as an intern in the American Painting, Sculpture, and Decorative Arts departments at the Baltimore Museum of Art. That was right before he joined us as a fellow. So Ben will be sharing his work on this study of Allard's furniture from a connoisseurship lens, and he will cover the comprehensive survey process, which is probably far more involved than you might expect, as well as what he has undertaken to study the findings and illuminate the working process of the man who made the Gilded Age glitter. So please join me in welcoming both of our speakers tonight, but first, Carola Schueller.
Okay, thank you very much for this very kind introduction. Welcome, everyone. I would like to sincerely thank, first of all, Curator Emeritus Paul Miller, who I see has arrived, wonderful. His groundbreaking research into Jules Allard's firm and persona made it possible for him to attribute more than 200 objects, furniture suites, and architectural elements held in the collection of the Preservation Society alone. His collaboration with original manufacturers supported the restoration of landmark architectural interiors. One example of many is the restoration of the Gothic room here at Marble House, right behind us. Building on Paul's research, I would like to start here off with a brief introduction to Jules Allard and his firm, including recent findings. Then I will talk about what piqued my interest in the workshop and objects attributed to Jules Allard. And lastly, I would like to give you examples of how a conservator's knowledge of materials and techniques contribute to the extensive research that our curatorial team and our research fellows do. Jules Allard was a prominent Parisian furniture maker, art dealer, and interior decorator of the late 19th century. He was in business from 1874 until 1907, when he died. Our current French Heritage Society intern, Theo Lorenzo, has dug out, among many other documents, birth, death, marriage certificates to give evidence of these dates. Allard worked with the most famous architect of the time on many of the grandest Gilded Age mansions for the wealthiest families in the country. He was so sought after that he gave proxy to numerous agents and set up a New York City office in 1885 under the name Jules Allard and Sons. Allard's decorating firm was responsible for popularizing the Louis XIV, XV, and XVI styles in the US. Our research fellow Ben will later go into much more detail for you and decipher the language of ornamentation. Jules Allard's meteoric rise was put in place by his father. Célestin Allard had an already successful furniture and upholstery company in Paris, and these lithographs show furniture designs with really highly sophisticated upholstery and bed hangings. His father had begun to envision a future in fabricating wall panels and whole rooms and had built up a network of contacts for all aspects of his clients' needs. He was well established and contributed to the World's Fair, like the one in London in 1851 at the Crystal Palace. Jules inherited this workshop and continued to work from the location shown on the lithographs for many years. He then expanded the business and quickly became the go-to decorator for historic French interiors. Here we see the same workshop address in a letterhead from 1885, 50 Faubourg du Temple in the heart of Paris. Allard's firm not only salvaged and adapted historic interiors, like the one that you can visit at the Breakers, the ladies' reception room, but he also created new pieces to match. Allard drew his inspiration from Europe's rich cultural heritage, predominantly France, of course. From the books that we know were in his library, we can trace back what he utilized to create the look of an old Europe. Allard's workshop employed highly skilled artisans who were trained in the traditional craft techniques and who were able to quickly produce suites of furniture and interiors on a really large scale. We know Allard employed cabinet makers, upholsterers, carvers, sculptors, gilders, and metalsmiths. Additionally, he most likely outsourced certain works to a wide network of related firms and crafts, like was common. A newspaper article from 1879 states that Allard employed 300 workers and was equipped with steam-powered woodworking machinery. And that detail will become interesting later on again. Before Allard became famous in the United States, he was already highly recognized in Europe. He was a regular competitor in numerous international exhibitions. At the 1878 World's Fair in Paris, he earned a gold medal for furniture for this Renaissance Revival cabinet on the left. The submission form in the center shows his request for a 6 by 3 meter space, which is roughly 190 square feet, so like a medium-sized bedroom. On the right, you see that he was honored as a Chevalier de la Légion d'honneur in 1878, which is the highest French order of military and civil merit. Other contemporary records, Theo found a shipping list, revealed Allard's contributions to the 1883 International Colonial and Export Exhibition in Amsterdam. Interestingly, not just as a competitor, but also as the designer for the proposed display cabinets for the French pavilion, one of them here on the right. Obviously, working here, I had heard about the firm, but I first conserved a piece of furniture attributed to Allard's workshop when it became necessary to reinstate the stability of this daybed from Mrs. Vanderbilt's bedroom at Marble House upstairs. In preparation of a contemporary art installation by Nicholas Pardee, here on the right, the finger, I had to carefully disassemble the daybed in order to reintroduce new glue into the joints. This revealed telltale tool marks of mortise and tenon joints cut by hand. The image in the center shows a view into the mortise with the typical marks from removing wood using a mortising chisel. So you kind of break the wood out of that hole. The image on the right shows the irregularly cut chamfer at the top of the tenon. During a temporary closure of Marble House in the winter of 2020, I had a chance to look closer at these two pieces of furniture. On the left is a nightstand, and on the right is a so-called semanier, a tall and narrow chest of drawers. Both pieces are part of a bedroom suite here in the guest bedroom upstairs, obviously for the people on Zoom at Marble House. The corner joints of the drawers are beautifully dovetailed. All joints are skillfully executed by hand with much attention to the fit. Details like the chamfered edges all around the rear of the drawer sides ensure that the drawers still run neatly in the housing, and that despite of the fact that this house does not have climate control. So that's actually quite remarkable. Handheld planes were used on most drawers for fitting the drawer bottom into the groove, as you can see here in the left image. And planes were also used to get the corner joints flush. To me, it really seems like corner joints on that drawer that you can see in the right. And you can actually see there's a little curl of wood still left over from like using a plane and not actually getting all the wood off. So to me, it really seems like the joiner put a certain pride into his handiwork by executing details that would not ever been visible when the drawer is in his housing. So we know, art historians and conservators both, that France had a long-standing, very effective apprenticeship system, educating young men in all areas of the wood refining crafts, including joinery, marquetry, turning, carving, etc. So these details are really neat to notice and record, but they are not really surprising. On another occasion, however, I came across tool marks that were not from traditional handheld tools. Many of the furniture show on backsides and undersides straight and regularly spaced marks of fine-toothed machinery. On the left, we can see the underside of a drawer bottom, and to the right, you see the backside of a curved apron. And both clearly show those really regular marks of probably a steam-powered machine. And we know from previous research in our field into other cabinet makers that roughly by the 1850s, late 19th century, woodworking shops in America were equipped with steam-powered machinery like circular saws, planers, band and fret saws. So it is wonderful that we can now associate these understudied and under-recorded tool marks to our Research Fellows findings. A completely different task led us to learn more about Allard's approach to architectural surfaces, like the ceiling in this room. After portions of the plaster decoration loosened, Chief Conservator Paddy Miller investigated the substrate of the ceiling. She found out it was made of plywood. You can see about the 3 different layers in that boring sample on your right. Portions of that plywood understructure were removed to save the plaster ornament, and this made it actually possible for us to look closer at the plywood. It consists of 3 layers, finished on both sides with a layer of veneer. Regular saw marks are visible throughout, which again supports that Allard's workshop was equipped with basic woodworking machinery. In fact, a letter that proposes the design for a dining room at Ochre Court, a mansion now owned by the Salve Regina University here in Newport, Allard proudly describes the fabrication process and use of plywood to counteract dimensional changes that can occur in any climate, but definitely in a sea climate like this one. A master of marketing, he puts himself at the forefront of modernity. He says, "The woodwork will be made of thin fir boats glued cross-grained as a backing for frames, moldings, and other attachments, and counter-veneered. All these precautions and conditions will be strictly observed in order to avoid deformation and loose joints that occur with poorly prepared wood." And we are seeing an application of this kind of plywood in the ladies' reception room at the Breakers. Some of the wood paneling was salvaged from an 18th century townhouse in Paris. In the center image, you can see the individual vertical boards employing traditional widening joints, and you can see the lines of those joints. The paneling of the 18th century room was then expanded to accommodate for the larger footprint at the Breakers. For this, the Allard workshop fabricated large plywood panels with similar ornamentation, but the toll of time made the top layer of the plywood veneer delaminate from other layers and bubble up. In raking light, these bubbles show and actually make it quite easy for us to determine Allard's additions. In fact, Allard's additions, unfortunately, did not, to the contrary of his promises, hold up that well over time. But I mean, that, it's 100 years ago, more than 100 years ago. So as the work goes on, we will continue looking for these hidden details that will let us enhance our knowledge of the works of art made and assembled in the workshops of Jules Allard et Fils. We will probably never find a signature on his pieces of furniture, although we've worked really hard on finding one. But his name is visible in other works across Marble House, the Breakers, the Elms, and Rosecliff, and assuring his name will forever be associated with the artistic achievements of the American Gilded Age. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you, Trudy, I saw her somewhere, Leslie and Paddy for letting me kickstart the furniture survey and present and publish first results with the Stitching Ebonist in Amsterdam. My thanks also to our dear former colleagues, Kathy and Kedra, for their contributions. Thank you, Theo and the French Heritage Society for supporting Theo's internship. And thank you, Catherine and Ben, for your ongoing dedication to the project and for your unstoppable enthusiasm. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Leslie and Carola, and a big thank you to the Preservation Society of Newport County for this fantastic fellowship opportunity and for hosting this event this evening. Hello, everyone. My name is Ben Bowery, and thank you so much for letting me share with you some of the exciting work I've been conducting here as a research fellow at the Preservation Society of Newport County. I began this project last September with past research fellow Kedrick Harris, and have learned so much not only about the work of Jules Allard, but about the incredible history of Newport, and it has been such a pleasure to work with this team here at the Preservation Society on this project. I'm excited to extend my fellowship for another year as we continue to make incredible strides in learning more about the complicated history of one of the most influential yet understudied artisans of the Gilded Age, who profoundly shaped the history of American design. I'd specifically like to thank Curator Emeritus Paul Miller, whose longstanding interest in Jules Allard has been a major influence not only on this project, but for raising awareness of Allard's work internationally, and I'm honored to build on his incredible work here. My presentation tonight, Data and Decoration, Studying the Furniture of Jules Allard, is a brief overview of the planning process for surveying the furniture in the collections of the Preservation Society, why this data is important, and our goals for this project. I'm also going to share with you some work we've done on the Preservation Society's newest and most exciting addition, Mr. Berwin's original bed and dressing commode from the Elms, and show how we were able to apply our survey to methodically study these pieces. My fellowship at the Preservation Society concerns the work of Jules Allard, a French craftsman and designer who led the firm Jules Allard et Fils from approximately 1874 to his death in 1907, and worked extensively on several of the homes now overseen by the Preservation Society. Allard was, functionally, what we would now call an interior designer, his work in these homes becoming a major influence in the professionalization of the interior design industry in the United States. However, Allard was much more than an interior designer. As noted on his firm's letterhead, Allard was a craftsman of artistic furniture, a designer of interior decoration, as well as a purveyor of old tapestries, antique woodwork, bronzes, and enamels. The Allard and Fils workshop had the ability to design and assemble every decorative aspect of a room for a client with incredible speed and attention to detail, utilizing the labor and expertise of 300 craftspeople. When we attribute our collections to Allard, we are often referring to Allard as the designer and head of the firm, while his large team of skilled craftspeople executed the complicated carving, construction, gilding, painting, weaving, upholstery, and myriad of other tasks necessary to create this stunning work. Allard's workshop would design and create this furniture and interiors in Paris, and then send these full rooms and suites of furniture to the United States to be reassembled on site. In effect, Allard defined the aesthetics of the Gilded Age, designing and decorating some of the most notable spaces in America for the highest echelon of 19th century society. His rooms became the stage for the most extravagant balls, lavish dinners, and shocking scandals of the Gilded Age. However, nowhere was Allard's work more celebrated than Newport, where the industrial titans of the Gilded Age erected palatial summer homes to let the historic elite know they had arrived and would not be ignored. As these families had not spent decades collecting European fine and decorative art to outfit their homes, what Allard and Fils offered was the ability to quickly decorate their new homes with furniture that looked like it had been plucked straight from the courts of France. Listed to the right are several of the homes Allard worked on in Newport, including Ochre Court for the Galette family and renovations at Beechwood for the Astor family. Today, the Preservation Society oversees 4 houses Allard managed interior decoration for. These are Marble House, built between 1888 and 1892, the Breakers, built between 1893 and 1895, the Elms, built between 1898 and 1901, and Rosecliff, built between 1899 and 1902. These houses represent the most extensive collection of Allard interiors and furniture of any organization in the United States, and likely even the world. As Allard has historically been overlooked by many design historians studying this period in American history, this sets the stage for my fellowship here in Newport, using these 4 houses and their collections to further our understanding of Allard, his designs, and his workshop. However, in starting this project, we ran into a major problem. Very few bills, letters, designs, and other correspondence survive between Allard, his clients, and their architects. We believe many of these documents were passed down in families and later lost in time, or fell outside the parameters of the Preservation Society's early collecting mission and were not actively acquired. We also have reason to believe Allard himself actually destroyed many of his bills and records due to a smuggling and tax evasion scandal in 1889, where Allard was accused of concealing paintings in his furniture and misrepresenting the source of historic wall paneling to avoid tariffs during shipping to the United States. Beyond a handful of historic photographs and inventories, we had very few primary sources that told us more specifically about Allard's work in these homes. As we lacked these major documents, I'd like to show you how our project is instead able to use furniture as a type of primary source document, and how we took this into account when planning and structuring our survey and the research around it. I'd first like to walk you through the two major goals of our survey. Our first and most major goal is to examine every piece of furniture attributed to Allard in the Preservation Society's collections. This spans hundreds of objects and includes chairs, tables, stools, armoires, beds, and even pet furniture. This is a miniature bergère just over 2 feet tall, and it was made by Allard for Hippodale, Elizabeth Drexel Laird's beloved Papillon. Today, these portraits and the pet chair are on display at the Elms. In addition to furniture, our houses also contain much of the original Allard textiles, paneling, sconces, and other interior elements, though these fall largely outside the confines of our survey and will be addressed by future fellows as part of the Preservation Society's ongoing efforts to research Allard's work in Newport. As we considered our goal, we had to address two questions. What kind of data did we want from our survey, and what was the most effective way to record it? This came together in our survey sheets. We explored multiple options for recording data and realized we needed a solution that could be easily utilized in the field, efficient and methodical for recording data, while also flexible enough to note anomalies, and have the ability to be edited later for accuracy. We settled on using editable PDFs that could be filled out on iPads or computers and did not require an internet connection, meaning they could easily be used anywhere across our properties. Using an array of editable checkboxes, drop-down menus, and typable fields, I created survey sheets that are quick and easy to use, keeping our data collection as organized as possible. On these sheets, we track a range of data. For example, we record measurements of each piece, wood analysis observations, prominent motifs, forms, and any unique marks we find. This leads into how we process this data. This is where the importance of quantitative data comes into play. By pulling the data from our survey sheets into an Excel document, we are able to then start building out a more analytical understanding of our observations. For example, we can quantify how many pieces Allard uses birds on, what kind of motifs are commonly found on Allard's chairs, or what rooms feature the most uses of hairy paw feet. This turns the aesthetics of Allard's individual work into larger chunks of information that can be used to draw overarching conclusions. For example, this data can be used by our curatorial staff as they interpret our houses, plan future exhibitions, and even draw connections between the properties. For this project, it's also important to record visual data. I'm building a design compendium to photograph, compile, and organize elements such as the different motifs Allard uses across his pieces. For example, these 3 female figures are found on tables original to the first floor of the Elms. As you can see, they are all quite different, suggesting the use of different models in the Allard workshop. Compiling a complete collection of female masks and caryatids, placing them in context to one another, and even searching for similar examples in other collections or historic design directories allows us an easy means of visual comparison. These two ways of processing data tie in closely to our survey's second major goal, to create resources that help researchers at other institutions learn more about Allard and definitively attribute some of their furniture to his workshop. This includes other historic house organizations, as well as museums and auction houses. Unfortunately, Allard signed very few interior elements and virtually none of his furniture. While we are confident in attributing many of our own pieces to Allard, other institutions are not, or may not even know it as a possibility Allard created an object in their possession. Using visual comparisons from the design compendium or conclusions from our data analysis, this gives other institutions the ability to more accurately attribute their furniture and interiors. We hope to create a definitive research package about Allard and his work to share with other institutions to expand their knowledge base and even jumpstart similar surveying projects elsewhere. We are also working to build relationships with other properties Allard worked on to expand our knowledge base. In the spring, members of our research team made a trip to Linwood Hall in Philadelphia, a Widener family property in the beginning stages of a large-scale preservation effort to view some of the Allard interiors still in the home. We are also in the early stages of working with the Biltmore in Asheville, North Carolina, another Vanderbilt family home, to explore Allard's connection to the house. Building this network allows us to expand our own research while also bolstering research at other institutions. Now, I'd like to share some of our results so far from our survey. One major element we've examined is the different historic styles Allard is using at each property, something that often differs room to room. Allard is broadly working under the umbrella of the Second Empire, a style that flourished under the reign of Emperor Napoleon III in the mid-19th century, utilizing what we now refer to as classical eclecticism. This means designers like Allard were drawing on forms and ornamental motifs from various historic styles, putting them together in a single piece, finishing them with upholstery that spoke to modern comfort, and ultimately creating a unique design amalgam. This style, in effect, showcased the aesthetic features of historic styles while divorcing them from their academic context. In our survey, we try to identify and track these individual historic elements to create a certain design coherence and group pieces with a dominant overarching style. For example, the Kuhl rule legs on this dining chair from the elms on the left are an older classical form that were commonly used in Renaissance furniture. On the right, you see a dining chair from Marble House, where the robust proportions of the chair, especially the legs, show Allard working in a more Baroque style. You see these robust proportions become a little more delicate, fanciful, and comfortable here in this chair from the Elms drawing room that takes after the Rococo style, while the form of this fauteuil chair on the right, with its rounded backrest, elegant curves, and fluted legs, is much more in an Empire or Neoclassical Revival style. Through tracking the ways Allard utilizes different historic styles in each room, we're able to begin to draw larger conclusions about aspects such as which design styles Allard finds suitable for public versus private spaces, or how a man's bedroom may be more appropriate to utilize Renaissance elements in, while it could be preferable to use Rococo pieces in a woman's bedroom. Clarifying design elements like this aids in more general interpretation efforts in these spaces, helping us both understand the larger decoration scheme of these homes, as well as delve into broader social and cultural history through the study of decorative art and design. Our second major finding is an ongoing effort to attribute furniture to Allard. As I previously mentioned, Allard signed virtually none of his pieces, and we lack thorough documentation directly linking Allard's workshop to very few objects. Because of this, we continue to look for ways to connect our collections to Allard. We have found multiple fragments of writing inside tables and case furniture, as seen here on the right. This is a Rococo night table from the Gold bedroom in the Elms, where I recently found writing in the compartment that holds the drawer. This fragment gives us the technical name of the form, table de nuit, and the style, Louis XV, or the period term for French Rococo. The use of French and the placement of writing inside the drawer compartment helps us link this piece and its suite more directly to the Allard workshop and assists us in knowing where to look for more writing. One of our most exciting finds so far has been on the back of the brass handles on the sideboard in the breakfast room of the Breakers. As you can see in the image on the right, the stamp on the back of these handles reads 909 JA. While we are still researching what the 909 is in reference to, likely something similar to a catalog number or a metal alloy mark, we feel confident in saying the JA references Jules Allard. This is one of the only Allard signatures we have found on any of our furniture pieces and has spurred an effort to closely examine both furniture and interior metalwork across our Allard properties. Another result we're excited to share is the major strides we've made through archival research in both the United States and in France to learn more about Jules Allard, his workshop, and his clients. The Preservation Society has maintained a long-standing and fruitful partnership with the French Heritage Society, a relationship created by Curator Emeritus Paul Miller and continued today by the President of the French Heritage Society and member of our International Council, Denis de Kergoulet. The French Heritage Society connected us with our current intern, Teo Lorenzo, who has made incredible discoveries that have greatly contributed to both the survey and our greater institutional knowledge regarding Allard, including information on his participation in international expositions, business records, legal documents, period news articles, and even new images of Allard, seen here. In the same article this image comes from, Teo found direct references to a foundry at the Allard workshop, confirming a long-held theory by Curator Emeritus Paul Miller, and helping us further attribute the stamps on the breakfast room handles to Allard. Additionally, and perhaps most exciting for the survey, Teo has uncovered our first drawings from the Allard workshop, including sketches of furniture submissions to the 1883 International Exposition in Amsterdam, seen here on the left, as well as pieces showcased to consumers in French newspapers, seen on the right. This research from Teo has given invaluable context to our survey findings and will be immensely useful as the Preservation Society continues its work around Allard for years to come. We're also excited by the way our survey is using our findings to strengthen our collections database. By taking the time to carefully look at every individual piece, we're able to add detailed notes and photographs to bolster each object file to help future conservators, collection staff, and researchers. We're also able to produce helpful documents, such as these room maps I generate for every space we survey, to note where each piece is in the room. This is especially helpful in rooms like the Breaker's dining room, where we have over 30 dining chairs. This also helps staff quickly find objects that could need conservation or attention, as well as help reset rooms after special events, or even filming for HBO's The Gilded Age, such as this scene from the season 1 finale that was filmed in the Breaker's music room. With Allard's furniture and interiors being shown to an international audience through the show, our project has become even more timely and exciting. Another notable element we're continuing to find in our survey concerns the more technical practices of the Allard workshop. Working with Carola Schueller, I have studied the construction and materials of many complex pieces in the collections to look for unique characteristics that give us a window into the interworkings of a large team of workers. An interesting aspect we've examined is the appearance and function of different assembly marks. In the top image, you see where the bottom support slats join into the sides of a bed frame with very clear, uniform numerical marks made from a stencil to show workers how to assemble the piece. The bed is quite large and would have been shipped over in parts, and these very clear, permanent assembly marks ensured workers in America could easily reassemble the bed properly. By contrast, in the bottom image, you see a pair of shallow, hand-gouged chisel marks I found on the back of a chair on the second floor of the Breaker's Great Hall. These marks serve a similar function to make sure workers would match up the parts of the piece correctly. However, these marks could easily be lost when the piece was later painted or gilded. We theorize these more informal assembly marks were instead intended for workers in the Allard workshop in Paris, only meant to be seen and used during production, as furniture like chairs were compact enough to be shipped pre-assembled. We found several different types of these marks, including tallies, as seen here, as well as half moons and light pencil markings, showing the hand of multiple different craftsmen in the workshop. Comparing and contrasting the usage of assembly marks across pieces tells us more about the life of a given piece, from its conception to its production to its eventual installation thousands of miles away. Carola and I have also examined notable tool marks as we've surveyed the furniture. While many pieces feature intricate hand-carved ornament, we have found many marks that suggest the use of steam power in the Allard workshop. Steam-powered machinery were a relatively new invention in the later part of the 19th century, providing a power source that could be utilized almost anywhere. This meant that large workshops were not reliant on geographic exclusionary environmental power sources, like a mill on a large river needing running water to turn a wheel. Instead, by using steam power to turn a central rotating chamber, much like the crankshaft in your car, energy could be transmitted to multiple machines using a series of belts, similar to this image in an American veneering workshop circa 1878 from Scientific American. This innovation allowed for the development of large, multifunction workshops in major urban centers, bringing skilled craftsmen into close proximity for quick and easy collaboration. Another major benefit of steam power was that it was both flexible and reliable, being relatively easy to control as compared to energy sources like wind or running water. Through Teo's research, we've been able to confirm Allard's workshop was using steam-powered machinery, a major step in further strengthening the work Carola and I have done to attribute various marks. For example, something we've noticed on many examples of Allard's furniture is the use of neatly planed boards in hidden areas, such as the backside of a cabinet or the under construction of chairs. The larger image here shows the inside of a drawer compartment we examined at the Elms. In raking light, we're able to see this series of evenly spaced regular lines, a section of which I've highlighted here, revealing to a trained eye the use of a machine-run blade. Their consistency and how incredibly parallel they are suggest to us the use of a reliable power source, namely steam. The horizontal lines you see show where the board would be fed into the machine. The appearance of these lines signals an imperfection in the blade, like a small notch. As the blade would turn, this irregularity would nick the board with each rotation, creating these horizontal lines. Prior to the widespread use of steam-powered tools, a worker would have to use a hand plane to achieve something similar, dragging the blade down a piece of wood to even and smooth the surface, something that would be quite time and labor-intensive and totally impractical for a detail that would never be seen. However, by using a steam-powered planer, much like the one pictured here, this process becomes fast and easy, a massive change from even 10 or 20 years earlier. This really highlights another reason a client would want to hire Allard. He had the ability to create high-quality, neatly finished furniture incredibly fast through his large team of workers and the use of power tools. These tools help explain how Allard was able to furnish homes like the Elms and the Breakers with such incredible attention to detail in approximately 2 years, something that would be an astronomical feat even today. For context, the Elm stands at over 60,000 square feet and was built primarily between 1899 and 1901. In this time, Allard was able to design, create, procure, ship, and reassemble the more than 20 rooms he primarily oversaw in the home, including furniture, paneling, and fine art for the sitting rooms, ballroom, dining room, bedrooms, and even bathrooms. There exists an interesting interplay here, where these Gilded Age mansions, largely made possible through their patrons' work and innovation in the rapidly evolving industrial sphere, were using the same technologies to be erected and furnished almost overnight. And that these mansions speak to the explosive wealth of the period through industrialization, they also speak to the possibilities of new technology and materials, as well as the less glamorous factors like fair and safe labor practices and environmental impact that came to shape the 20th century in our world today. I'd now like to close my presentation by showcasing to you one of the most exciting recent additions to our collection, the bed and dressing commode for Mr. Berwin's bedroom at the Elms, generously donated by Mr. Alan Fletcher and Mr. Ronald Schueller. To provide some brief context, after the death of Julia Berwin in 1961, the Elms was purchased by a commercial developer who planned to raise the home to build a shopping center. In June of 1962, an auction was held on site, and most of the furniture was purchased and removed from the house. Shortly after, a mere weeks before the house was to be demolished, Catherine Warren and the Preservation Society reached a deal to acquire the property, and it was open to the public for tours days later. Many local residents donated their furniture they had purchased from the auction back to the house, while others donated their own furniture to furnish the home in an appropriate style. Many of the original Elms pieces remain in circulation today and have been regularly donated back to the Preservation Society ever since. Most recently, this includes Mr. Berwin's bed and dressing commode. Seen here are these beautiful pieces, reassembled in the basement kitchen of the Elms by Carola and I back in the winter for our initial surveying. The donation of these stunning pieces are the centerpiece for the Preservation Society's forthcoming project through the generous support of Mr. James Berwin to restore and reinterpret Mr. Berwin's bedroom on the second floor of the Elms, where you'll be able to view this suite in the near future. I'd also like to show how we're able to use our survey to create initial object-based research around these objects that can be built on later by curators and conservators, aiding in this exciting new project. One of our most major results from surveying the Berwin bedroom suite has been developing our understanding of how Allard is interpreting Renaissance design in this space. While the rectilinear forms and use of classical ornaments solidly connect these pieces to the Renaissance style, the design is not as sculptural, robust, and heavy as most furniture from the period. Even when looking at examples of Renaissance Revival furniture from the 19th century, most pieces have an elaborately ornamental astragal-shaped crest, while this bed form is incredibly rectilinear. This tells us more about Allard's unusual interpretation of Renaissance design and can help us identify more Allard furniture in this style. Part of this design research includes comparing the carving to historic examples. On the left is a wreath found on the center of both the footboard of the bed and center door of the dressing commode. It is made of distinct fruits and berries, bound with a ribbon, and features a bulbous cartouche in the center. We can compare this to an example below from Henri Avard's Dictionnaire de l'ameublement et la décoration, a source we know Allard owned based on book inventories, as well as similar designs from the book found on other pieces. This sketch from Avard can, in turn, be found on this older French carved chest panel from the 16th century, now in the collection of the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. This creates a logical progression where we can reconstruct Allard's design inspirations and track his unique contributions to the design. For example, we see here on the historic panel that the carving is quite busy, filling out the whole space with serpentine arabesques, this heavy carving being characteristic of the Renaissance style. However, on the panel for Mr. Berwin's bed, we see that Allard has really stripped this design down to its primary elements, leaving much more negative space, and he has added a crinkled ribbon, a romantic motif found throughout the Elms. This reads quite masculine, especially compared to the romantic and florid work seen elsewhere in the home. We continue to look for similar examples to thoroughly understand Allard's design influences, as well as his unique work as a creative throughout our collection. Surveying the Berwin bedroom furniture and generating new scholarship around them will also help us generate attention to this exciting new acquisition and hopefully find and identify the missing pieces of the suite. Based on the auction catalog, we know that there is a marble top night table, 3 side chairs, and a library table en suite with the bed and dressing commode. Based on other bedroom suites in the Elms, we believe these missing pieces contain similar carved ornament and generally sparse rectilinear treatment of form. In the coming months, we hope to publish articles and information about our furniture to help find out what happened to the rest of the suite and hopefully reunite this beautiful collection of furniture at the Elms. One final and very recent result I'm thrilled to report is some of the new avenues of research these objects have opened up in our larger study of Allard. During our initial surveying of the dressing commode, Carola and I found multiple pieces of metalwork marked with a stamp reading GG and surrounded by a decorative border, seen here. At the end of July, while searching for more metal marks at the Elms, we uncovered more GG stamps on the handles of the buffet in the dining room, pieces we know never left the home during the auction. We are still working with Teo to find the foundry these GG-marked handles came from, and this forthcoming discovery will reveal a currently unknown subcontractor Allard was working with, giving us another way to further attribute pieces to Allard and providing a new lead for searching for bills and correspondence. This also further cements the Berwyn bed and dressing commode into the collections of the Elms, drawing connections between rooms and deepening our understanding of Jules Allard. I'd like to thank you all so much for joining us this evening to learn more about my research at the Preservation Society of Newport County. There are almost too many wonderful people to thank who have contributed to the success of this project, but I'd like to start by recognizing Trudy Cox, the Preservation Society's CEO and Executive Director, as well as William F. Lucy III, the Chairman of the Preservation Society's Board of Trustees, for their fantastic leadership and support. I'd additionally like to give a very special thank you to Jacalyn and William P. Egan, who made this event possible through their incredibly generous sponsorship of this evening's lecture. The Egans are part of a remarkable group of donors who have given support to the Preservation Society's residential fellowship program, and I know I speak for fellows both past and present in conveying a very heartfelt thank you for all these individuals for their generous support of emerging scholars here at the Preservation Society. And I would, of course, be remiss if I did not thank the fantastic team here at the Preservation Society who have given their valuable time and energy to support this project, including Leslie Jones, Carola Schueller, Catherine Moran, Nikki Williams, and Kate Pedersen. I'd also like to thank our research intern from the French Heritage Society, Teo Lorenzo, who's contributed invaluable research to this project. And finally, I'd like to give a very special thank you to Curator Emeritus Paul Miller, whose longstanding advocacy for the importance of Jules Allard gave us an incredible launching pad for this project and continues to be an invaluable resource as we delve into Allard's furniture and interiors. If you have any questions or would like to contact me about this project, please feel free to email me at bbowery@newportmansions.org. Again, thank you so much for joining us this evening, and I would now like to invite Carola Schueller to join me on stage to help answer any questions you all may have. Thank you.
Please raise your hand and one of us will come around with a microphone.
Yeah, I wonder if you can give us any information on the Elms wood carvings, particularly the ones on the doors and the panels in the breakfast room.
Yes. So, breakfast room, wood panels, Elms, yes. So, I know that those panels are made out of wood, out of oak. Our former chief conservator, Jeff Moore, actually pointed out to us that there are portions that look much older in those, it's all panel and framework, and some portions of that panel and framework is actually older than the rest. So it does look like, we haven't looked into detail, but it does look like some of the carving in the corners of those panel and framework is older than the long vertical frame members. So it kind of looks like that these panels come from an older house maybe and have been extended to accommodate those really, really large ceilings. But that's what I can say.
At the risk of presenting the most mundane question for the evening, I need to ask you, we hear all about the wonderful studio in Paris, we see the wonderful objects here in Newport. I would like to ask how they got from Paris to that corner of the Elms. Two parts. Number one would be, how were they sold to the owners? Was it done through a purchasing rep or to the lady of the house? The second question is, can you walk us through the journey from the studio to a truck to a ship to a port in the United States to Newport? Can you just walk us through that journey, please?
I can answer
Thank
some
you.
of this. Based on some of the fabulous research by Theo, and even some documents we still have here in Newport, namely the correspondence between Allard and the Goulet family over at Ochre Court, we know that Allard really worked personally with his clients. So I think it is a little bit of an untruth when you might hear someone say, like, these patrons weren't involved in the interior decoration of their home. These people, from what we can tell, were very personally involved in how Allard was decorating their home. Even we have a letter saying that Cornelius Vanderbilt II wanted the carving in the library of the breakers to be a little bit more shallow. So these were people who were very, very interested in the details. We know that Allard could take clients when they would come to visit Paris. These patrons were very well traveled and would frequently travel to Paris. He could take them into his workshop and say, oh, look at these fabulous panels I recently acquired. Wouldn't these look great in your new home in Newport? But he also had agents here in the United States, namely New York, and specifically his son, who could do something similar for clients. And we do have one of the original shipping containers over at the Elms to answer the second part of your question. And thanks to Theo's research and some other work we've done, including with the Biltmore, we do have a little bit of documentation that tells us about how these containers would leave the port of Le Havre and arrive here in the United States, make their way to Newport, and then a very large team of workers would make this happen overnight.
I actually have one small addition, I think. This was great. We do know that Allard had a shop front on Fifth Avenue, but he also had a location in an area that was much more industrial, and also in New York City, where he was in close proximity to, like, I believe, like a marble cutter. And so we think that the bulk of the work was done in Paris and then shipped over, but certain portions may have also been made or adapted here in America, but that is still unclear. So it might be that, you know, some of the decorative works were done in America. But again, this is like pure my head right now.
And this is what we're excited to learn more about as we continue the survey.
Yeah.
Our next question is over here.
Thank you. I actually was going to ask a similar question. It was answered. So how did he actually become the person he was? So how did he become famous amongst the owners of these mansions? My follow-up questions would be, do we know of any rivals that he cut out? So was he the only one who did this, or were there more interior designers who were, you know, after this prize, essentially?
What was the first question again?
It's mostly, the answer was already given, that the way he became famous was probably through the Fifth Avenue storefront. Yeah. But were there any rivals that he kind of beat on this?
So he did work on the opera in Paris
the opera
with a famous French architect. So it's very likely that patrons who came over to France actually saw this. He was a contributor to all these international fairs, so it's very well, possible that they heard about him there. And then he did work with designers and furniture makers that were already established, like the Herter brothers. And so he did, I think that's how the connection came to the Vanderbilts, if that might be right. Or Hunt, obviously, yeah, of course, Hunt, who both went to the Académie des Beaux-Arts in Paris. And And then from there on, once he had a foot in the door with the Vanderbilts, remodeling a bathroom for Louisa Vanderbilt, I think they just liked what he did, and then he was chosen again and again.
I'd also like to highlight something Carola talked about in her presentation a little bit, which was the impact of Celestin Allard, his father. According to a very fabulous article written by our curator emeritus, Paul Miller, written by Richard Guy Wilson, who consulted with Paul Miller, he talks about the construction of the interiors at Harbor Hill. And in this article, he talks about how Celestin Allard was really one of the first people kind of in the world to have this idea of not just producing individual furniture for a room, but being able to decorate a room from top to bottom. He could do the paneling. He could do a suite of furniture. And this just wasn't something that was really done in the United States and probably the world before this. So Allard was really building on his father's legacy and continuing his work at these mansions.
We have time for one more question.
Hi, yes. After he died, did the business prolong, or did it have, was it in a death cycle? Did it have 5-10 years after he died? And secondly, has Paris or France itself done any preservation efforts to preserve like the roots of that factory, because as a primary source of, industrial equipment, or are there any efforts on the French side that you could correlate, some of your tool marks to, or any sort of efforts there that help you in your correlations?
So we know Allard died in 1907, and shortly after his firm was absorbed by Alavoir, another French firm, and then later that firm was absorbed by Samuel, which is another reason why we think that some of the Allard documentation kind of got lost a little bit in there. So Allard had 2 sons, and one of them, Fernand Allard, we know continued with Alavoir in a small capacity, but the firm really just kind of dissolved shortly after, largely.
Yeah, and regarding if there is any effort to save anything in France, so we are not yet aware of what Allard pieces are in France and what interior still exist. We know that he equipped or decorated houses for the Rothschild family, and I think I want to keep it at that. We are not actually quite sure, but that is definitely an area of research we want to look into, or we hope that, with the increased interest in Jules Allard, maybe people come forward and contact us. I'm not making. Sorry. Oh, the shop still exists?
The building at the Rue de Faubourg, that still exists in Paris, actually. So the building exists, from what we understand. Sorry, I'm Leslie Jones. I'm the Director of Museum Affairs. That's why I'm chiming in. But yeah, from what Carola and Ben both said, there's still so much for us to learn. And we're also hoping that our partnership with the French Heritage Society, our continued partnership, will help yield more interest from the French side of things too. So, not only shopping out our survey forms for our partners to use at other institutions. Prime example is the Ringling in Florida. They have an Allard interior. So trying to help other institutions identify Allard in their collection, we're hoping to be at the forefront of making a more global effort and giving him the due that he is due.
Thank you so much, Carola and Ben, for your wonderful lectures. And thank you all for being here tonight. And we hope you all join us this Thursday at 6 p.m. at the Breakers for the John G. Winslow lecture. We hope to see you there. Thank you.